Welcome in, listeners. This is the SFR She Suite podcast. This is our second podcast, and we are so excited to be here and be sharing our insights with you and the industry. My name is Mendy Seeger, and I am so glad to be here.
Hey guys, I'm Tonya Odell. I've been in the single family space for about 16 years now. This is my first podcast, and I'm so honored and humbled to be on with these two ladies and excited to bring some cool topics to the table for you guys.
Hey, Stacy. I'm going to try to tone it down as much as I can, seeing as there's a lot of things we want to talk about. So I'm going to try to behave. My family owned a construction company for 84 years. So I'm on the vendor advocate side of the world, right? So yeah, I think we were just going to go in and start talking about fear and confidence with women and walking into these conferences. Tonya, you're at a conference right now, right? How do you feel going in there? Like, were you ready to go?
I felt ready to go, but I will say it's been something that's evolved over time, right? So I'm at the Florida State NARPM conference, and I happen to know a lot of the women here. This conference was pretty much put on by 99.9% of some awesome badass women that we would want to be a part of our She Squad for sure. And they do an amazing job, but most of them I've known for, 10, 12 years at least. So for me, this conference was kind of a reiteration of that, and those relationships. But boy, can I remember, 12, 13, 14 years ago, when I would come to these conferences like this one, and you don't really know anyone, and there's 70% less females than there are now. And it was intimidating for me. I know whether I'm on the exhibitor side or working for a property management company, which I've done both, when you're speaking with someone at these conferences and you're new to the industry, I feel like, especially as a female, we tend to second guess what we say, and we try to overdo it to sound like we know what we're talking about when we don't know what we're talking about. Or maybe that was just me back in the day. But like I said, man, can I remember when you're just kind of scrambling and insecure and don't know where to sit or who to talk to.
Yeah, I went into my first one was NRHC, and then I was speaking on a panel. Talk about nerve-wracking. Holy shit, right? So the entire audience, I remember sitting up there and with a lot of, the other big companies that are in this industry and things like that. And I remember sitting there going, you know what? Well, do I actually have a place sitting here? Why the hell was I second guessing myself? You got to be your own advocate, right? I know what the fuck I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. I'm deserving sitting up here. You know what I mean? I may not have this big fancy title, and I'm sitting against, the other big VPs and stuff like that. But yeah, I walked in there feeling a little small, and that was it. Like, not really confident, right? And then after the second one, then everyone's saying, "Hey, you did sound like you know what you're talking about," because I was speaking for them.
Don't you think we're our own worst enemy in those situations too?
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to not only learn how to be nicer to ourselves and speak to ourselves in a way that's supportive, because we are our own worst enemy. I think it just comes natural, especially as women, we're second guessing ourselves. But it's so important to have your people behind you and know who's really on your team and who's really not, and help navigate through that. But it's so important to have your support system before you go onto a panel, during and after, to get that feedback, and that emotional support, I think, is probably more important. And it's good to have your personal friends and your industry friends behind you to give you that support, to have your support system with you when you're doing those scary things, and then getting that positive reinforcement after the fact. Hey, you did good. And then you can build upon that, because I think you and Stacy are both right when you say, you don't just show up one day and you've made it. This is a series of steps, and do the smaller things that are scary, and then build up to the bigger ones, and practice rehearse. That helps as well.
But yeah, we all supported each other. We walked in the rooms together, those certain things, but that made me feel better. And just like you said, Mendy, the more and more we do those conferences and things like that, and after an hour you go in there, you're like, what was I so worried about? What was I so worried? What's the fear of?
It's a common thing where you're like, why was I so worried? It's usually after the fact when you got it done, you got moved through it. You're like, that wasn't so bad. And on the other side of fear is reward. And those are the small wins that you get to see. Most of what fear is, it's all things we've made up in our heads. And yes, it might be something that we experienced previous that is fueling it. But a lot of times it's just, we're our own worst enemy. We need each other to support each other to get us through those things. Because when we're done doing that fearful event, we end up going, that was not so bad. And I can do that again. And I can do something bigger next time.
And I think that's what happens is when, I'm not going to lie, there's been times, and I've had people tell me, oh, well, I wouldn't have known that you were nervous, or you didn't act nervous, or you didn't, but I feel like I look like a pile of jitters and my face feels all red. I'm not going to lie. There's been times when I've had anxiety for 48 hours before a speaking event or a panel or something like that. And then, like you said, like after the fact, you're like, why was I so worried? But for people that have never done it before, like, just know that every time you do it, you are conquering a fear, and you get a little more confident and a little more confident every single time. But no, most people that speak publicly or perform, like, they're a little bit nervous every time. And they'll say that, even celebrities and stuff, they'll be like, I'm kind of nervous every time I get on stage. And I try to remind myself that too, like, it's okay to be a little bit nervous. That means you care.
You just got to go in there and just do it. And yeah, just like you're saying, is every time we do it, we get better and better.
As women, have you experienced pushback in the field or testing for knowledge in the field?
Absolutely. Yeah. My mom, obviously, you guys know the construction company side of the world, right? So she went and created a women's business, All American Underpinning and Shoring Inc., right? So she was against every male counterpart. Wow. You know what I mean? She used to tell me, what she used to tell me is you got to walk in there and act like a boss and shake someone's hand right. Okay. Yes. Elbows up. Okay. Like a boss. But that was mainly a lot of pushback on what do women think about construction? We know just as much as a man does. Where did that, thankfully that landscape is changing, but that was a lot of the stuff out in the field, is these, and some men are still the same way. I'm not men bashing here or anything, but there are some men that still believe that way, but I think it's changing.
I think so too. I can't tell you how many times in the field I get tested for knowledge, and I've gotten to the point where I'm just looking at my watch like, okay, let me know whenever you're done with this so we can actually get down to business and do some business here. It's, I've had so many wonderful male counterparts that I've had the pleasure and the privilege to work with, but there's just those few that kind of ruin it. They're like, okay, well, this is going to be about my ego today. And I need to test you for knowledge. I need to see if you I need to feel like I'm putting you in your place. And unfortunately that happens, and you just got to handle it with grace and actually let your actions show who you really are. Thankfully, you're absolutely right, Stacy. That is less and less. As many years ago, I was going into a new organization, and I was meeting all the superintendents for the first time. And there was this one superintendent that was the scariest, grouchiest, most intimidating superintendent. And I think he was trying to be that way, but that really was just part of who he was. And then after meeting all the superintendents, and he was very intimidating, I get the news, hey, Mendy, you're going to be doing a ride all day. You're going to spend with each and every one of the superintendents. And I thought, oh, great. That's just great. And they said, well, who's the first one you want to ride with? And I'm like, that mean son of a bitch right there is the first one I want to ride with, because I just want to rip the Band-Aid and get this over with. And I will never forget, I was very intimidated to spend the day with this person. But they were the absolute best superintendent of the group. But it was just facing that fear, facing that intimidation, and understanding, oh my gosh, this person isn't like that at all. They're wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and I think that happens a lot. And with that situation, you gave him the opportunity to show you a little bit of his humanness, you know, instead of just being a stereotype or a persona. I'm sure he appreciated that. Even if he was a grumpy grouch, he probably felt like he had made a little bit of a friend, and he probably doesn't have many friends. The people who try the hardest to prove a point or whatever are the people, in my opinion, that have the biggest insecurities or that weakness inside, that they're just that void that they're constantly trying to fill. And so if you can be strong enough, like, to not let that bother you or intimidate you, and you just jump in, you know, butt naked in the water, you come out on top, because then you kind of, I don't want to use the word control, but you have the power in the relationship at that point, because you created that relationship from something that didn't exist. And if you needed something, I bet you could have called him.
The reason I shared that story is because part of the challenge is, like we've talked about, let's label it, and then let's attack it, and let's face it. And like we've talked about earlier on this podcast, we're facing that fear. We are pleasantly surprised on the other side of that. Oh my gosh, that was just not as bad as I had that in my head.
See, I get along with contractors. Okay. They're like my people, you know, it's just the way that I was raised or something like that. I get along with those people. The other side of the coin is the people in the offices and things like that. I do not have boardroom talk. You guys know that. I'm not allowed in a boardroom with people from like, no way. Don't take Stacy in there. But maybe I am. I don't know. Maybe I put that in my head, you know, for some reason. But yeah, the guys in the field, I can roll with those guys. But yeah, internally in an office setting, you know, I really I
get intimidated if somebody's trying to talk over my head or using really big words, or you can just tell they're trying to speak Chinese. I don't know a better word to use. And so kind of having to reframe and say, okay, this is the situation I'm in, and I got to find a way to connect with this person so that they will try to connect with me as well. Finding some commonality to connect with them so that you can try to help redirect that conversation so it's not so above you or outside of you, or that's where I kind of run into trouble sometimes.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I've definitely been in those situations where you feel like you start to feel like people are talking at you, you know, from that level. And I feel like where I get the most, you know, and I know several CEOs of some of these large companies or C-suite individuals that have put intentional effort into learning how to connect. When you put yourself in a situation to where you're speaking with an intellect that's really higher than 99% of the people in the room are even going to understand, are you really getting any point across? No. But when you can learn how to connect with people and translate information in a way where everybody can absorb it.
Stacy really talks loudly about, and that's being unapologetically you, being authentic. And I think there's definitely a more room for more authenticity, especially in the corporate side of this business. And it allows for people to connect, and it allows for deeper understanding that we're people running a business.
Well, if you're a good CEO and you're not connecting with your audience, should you really have that title? You know what I mean? Like, let me just say it in a different perspective. Okay. Leadership styles. I have, you know, a team, and every one of them respond differently. So I have to find out their personality, know what drives them, know what makes them move, motivation. Every one of them is different. I can talk to this person this way. I can talk to this person this way. And that's how you connect with people. That's the, so if a CEO is looking at a room and not connecting with the majority of the people, maybe you shouldn't even have that title.
Stacy, you touched on something that's so important is, it's our job to take what the CEO says, what the C-suite says, and translate that down through the organization, translate it to our teams. And Stacy, you really touched on something that was so important, is that there's no one right way to do that. It depends on your team, and it takes being authentic and knowing your team so that you're able to translate the vision of the company to your teams effectively so that they can take that torch and run with it and execute on those instructions.
I tell them of my fears first. I become vulnerable, right? And then they go, oh, okay, I feel the same way, right? And then immediately this wall goes down. That's how I do it.
The front lines are the ones who run the business, who get it to run, to get the machine going and keep the engine running. And because you're connected, because you share with them your authentic moments, it helps them come back to you and, say, hey, this is the data coming back from the front lines. We need to make these adjustments. You wouldn't get that if you didn't have a trusted relationship with those people. That is so important.
I'm just as doing the work, right alongside of them as they are. There's, always, hey, what do you need? What do you need? How can I help? How can I help? Being a resource, things like that. But yeah, that's back to the, but I also have to, make sure that they know that they're in good hands too, and I have their back.
That is a huge, huge, huge component of tackling fear and building confidence, is being someone who is willing to ask a question, right? Or say when you don't understand something.
Or clarify.
I have a feeling we've all been there where you're sitting in a lecture or you're in some training or somebody's trying to teach you something and you kind of don't understand something, but you don't want to sound like an idiot. And you're, because you're thinking, oh, if I ask that, it'll be stupid. And the older you get, you realize that every single time I speak up and ask a question, there's 5 other people going, oh yeah, I was thinking that too. Or it prompts them to ask something. Every single time. And I feel like that's a huge component in this industry for women, especially when you're talking about, overall property management, asset management, field services and stuff, where you have to be willing not only to, stand up when you do know what you're talking about, but be brave enough when you don't.
Well, I know that we've got a few minutes left, but wanted to talk a little bit about stereotypes or misconceptions about women in the industry.
I would say that one big misconception is that we are too emotional to handle strenuous, powerful, diabolical situations, or we have the inability to separate personal, emotional life from professional life.
That's a very good one that you just said that, because we're probably the best at multitasking.
To touch on the emotional, I know that when I'm really passionate about something, I have to take a step and back and look at it and say, okay, I'll return that email tomorrow. Or I will, let's have a meeting about this to discuss some clarity around what's going on. I think there is room to welcome emotion, because we're not robots. We're humans. And especially when it really affects our teams, it affects our jobs. There is an ethical issue going on where okay, we really do need to stand up for what's wrong here. I think there is room for constructive emotion, not destructive emotion.
This just cracks me up, because I used to have yesterday, it was a couple days ago, but I used to work for a very, very nasty leader, right? And I literally had to say, I cannot respond to him before 10 a.m. I knew myself. I knew that it was just going to come off bad. He was so nasty, but I actually had to not respond to him after a certain time of day. So I didn't go flying off the handles and didn't get emotional and whatever.
Sure.
But it was wrong. And I stand up for what is right. What he was doing was wrong.
I think understanding our emotions, practicing self-care, practicing delay. Let's delay this. Let me regroup. Let me talk to an industry friend. Let me talk to a personal friend. Let's throw this out on the table and see what's really going on here. Finding a way to take that emotion out and deal with it so that you can then be more constructive in handling whatever the situation is.
I think women are definitely kind of put in a box when it comes to being reactive, right? Being emotionally reactive. You say something I don't like. So instead of taking that 24 hours, which kind of both of you have mentioned are not responding before 10 a.m., we're quick to like snap back, or the mama bear comes out, or whatever you want to call it. And I know I've been guilty of that too. And I'll, 3 hours later, I'll look back at that email I responded with and I'm like, why didn't I wait?
Because, it's been right. What am I going to do now?
Wait? And then I'm like picking up the phone and I'm like, sorry, Stacy, I overreacted. That creates confidence too, being able to be self-aware whenever you have, been reactive or been whatever it is and just said, you know what, my bad. And every time I've done that, I've been, it's had a lot better outcome. If I take a minute, ask a trusted colleague or friend, even professional and personal, if it's a relationship thing, if it's a teacher or coach or whatever, if you get
ChatGPT,
play in the football
we got
ChatGPT
now.
We literally just got through this. Remember, there was some feedback, right, of doing a podcast and all sorts of other things. And I said, I need to, talk to you guys, right? And we need to sort through it and figure it out.
And we did.
And we did. We sorted it out. Yeah, we said, okay, let's not, this is probably coming from a different place, whatever we were talking about, I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, we solved it so we didn't act emotional.
It's a great example, like you said, Tonya, of us learning how to perform self-care, perform care amongst ourselves, and come up with, okay, let's give ourselves space to have some emotions, but also let's talk about ways that we can manage through this so that we're still taking care of ourselves, taking care of the industry, taking care of the issue at hand.
I had someone tell me one time who's in the self-care world, like when it comes to women, whether you're mom, wife, work from home, work in an office, whatever it is, your day-to-day life, right? If you don't do anything for yourself, whether it's getting older and making sure your hormones are balanced, or you're taking your vitamins, you're getting some sunshine, stress relief, whatever it is, you will never be able to be your best self for anything in any situation or anyone if you don't ever, put effort into taking care of yourself and making sure you're physically, mentally, emotionally sound.
We'll be talking offline about what our next topic's going to be. I'm sure it's going to get
absolutely. And our guests that we're going to be having coming. We wanted to spend these first two podcasts talking about who we are, talk about the industry, talk about some of the issues we want to tackle, but pretty soon here we're going to be having some phenomenal guests that we're finalizing now on this podcast, and we are super excited.
Well, you guys, that's a wrap today. It's been awesome as always, and we will see you next time on the She Suite.